When Hollywood's most bankable star walked into the View studio in his signature leather jacket and casual t-shirt, nobody imagined the easygoing smile he wore would fade into the kind of icy stare that would stop even Whoopi Goldberg mid-sentence. What began as a lighthearted interview quickly devolved into a live television moment so tense the audience forgot to clap. You're about to see how a man who built his career on respect and family found himself facing a storm of insults, and how one cruel remark about his family made him walk off the View for good. The morning at ABC Studios had been bright, crisp, and buzzing with excitement. Jason Momoa arrived early, as he always did, his imposing figure exuding a laid-back confidence as he greeted everyone with a hearty "Aloha." He exuded warmth, shaking hands with crew members, smiling at makeup artists, even signing an autograph for a young stagehand who whispered, "You're my hero." In the green room, he sipped black coffee while his publicist went over talking points for his new action fantasy film. As usual, he nodded politely, listening, but didn't seem nervous. He had done hundreds of interviews. Hell, he'd done thousands since his acting days, and he prided himself on staying composed. Whoopi Goldberg, however, had been pacing on set before the cameras rolled. Her co-hosts, Sunny, Anna, and Sarah, looked mildly concerned as she muttered to herself, flipping through her notes. "If no one else is going to say it, I will," she was overheard saying. When Jason finally walked out, the studio erupted. Cheers, whistles, and applause filled the room as he flashed his megawatt smile, hugging Anna, shaking hands with Sarah, and exchanging kind words with Sunny. But when he turned to Whoopi, she offered only a curt nod and a faint smirk. "Welcome back to the View, Jason," she said flatly, as though reading from a teleprompter. "Thanks for having me, Whoopi," he replied warmly, undeterred. The first few minutes were what everyone expected. Banter about his movie, his workout routine, a funny anecdote about his daughters and his dog. The crowd laughed, the host giggled. Even Whoopi cracked a faint smile at one point, though her eyes were sharp, calculating. Then it was Whoopi's turn to ask a question. She leaned forward, lowering her voice for effect. "Jason," she began, "you've been very successful at selling yourself as this wholesome, hardworking American dream story. But don't you think it's a little dishonest? You're a stuntman turned actor. You're not really an actor. Do you honestly think you belong in the same conversation as Meyer Street or Dyro?" The question landed like a hammer. The audience gasped. The other host froze. Jason's smile faltered for a millisecond before returning. Softer now, his jaw tightening slightly. "I think everyone has their own path." "Whoopi," he said calmly, "I've never claimed to be Mariel or Dairo, but I work hard. I care about the craft, and audiences seem to appreciate that." But Whoopi wasn't done. She raised an eyebrow and smirked. "Care about the craft or care about the paycheck? You've made what? Hundreds of millions of dollars playing yourself in every movie. You ever think about giving someone with real talent a shot instead?" A murmur went through the studio. Jason's hands rested on his lap, fingers steepled, his knuckles white. His gaze never left hers. "With all due respect," he said evenly, "I take nothing for granted. I've worked since I was 14 cleaning pools and landscaping for $40 a night. If that offends you, well, I can't help that." For a moment, Whoopi sat back, her smile almost triumphant, as though she believed she had struck a nerve. The audience, however, had grown uneasy. The energy in the room had shifted. This wasn't just an interview anymore. It was something else, and it was only the beginning. The tension in the studio had grown thick enough to slice through. Jason Momoa adjusted slightly in his chair, his fingers curling against the armrest, while Whoopi flipped her note cards with an almost theatrical flair. The audience shifted uneasily, sensing that the usual playful banter had given way to something darker, a clash of personalities, neither willing to back down from. Sunny tried to lighten the mood. "Jason," she interjected gently, "tell us about that hilarious stunt from your movie. You actually jumped it from a moving helicopter." Jason smiled faintly at her, grateful for the save, and began describing the sequence. But he barely got 2 sentences in before Whoopi cut him off. Right," she said, waving a dismissive hand. "We've all seen the trailer, Jason. Explosions, muscles, big smiles. My question is, do you actually think that's acting? A few awkward chuckles rippled through the crowd, but they quickly quieted when they realized she wasn't joking. Jason turned to her slowly, his voice even. I think entertaining people, making them forget their problems for 2 hours, that's a form of acting. Yes, Whoopi leaned forward, her eyes narrowing. Or maybe it's just flexing in front of a camera and letting CGI do the rest. The jab stung more than Jason let on, though his expression didn't falter. He gave a short, sharp laugh, shaking his head just slightly. Well, Whoopi, I'd invite you on set to see how much CGI it takes to haul myself out of bed at 4 o'clock a.m. to train or to rehearse fight choreography for 12 hours straight. It's not as easy as it looks, but I respect your opinion. Anna Navarro finally jumped in. Come on, Whoopi. Don't you think you're being a little hard on him? He's built an incredible career. People love him. But Whoopi shot her a look that silenced her instantly. Oh, I'm just getting started, Whoopi said dryly. Let's talk about your so-called career, Jason. Do you ever think about how many real actors you've pushed out of roles because producers know your name sells tickets? Don't you think it's unfair that you've taken up space that serious actors have worked their whole lives for? The crowd gasped audibly this time. Jason's jaw set, his hand curled into a fist in his lap before he forced it open again. With respect, Whoopi, I've never taken anything I didn't earn. And if producers believe I bring value to a project, that's their choice. I can't apologize for working hard and delivering results. Whoopi chuckled under her breath, shaking her head. Delivering results? She repeated mockingly. You mean playing the same guy in every movie? The big charming guy who beats people up. Congratulations, Jason. You've perfected the art of being yourself. The other hosts exchanged worried glances. Even the camera operators seemed to pause, unsure where to focus their lenses as the confrontation escalated. The audience, sensing history in the making, sat dead silent. Whoopi leaned back in her murmur, arms crossed as if she had already won. You know what really bothers me? She continued. You sit here flashing that smile, selling your little fairy tale of grit and determination to people who don't know any better. You make them believe that they can be you if they just work hard enough. That's dangerous. That's a lie. Jason finally spoke, his voice lower now, but sharper. It's not a lie to tell people they can better themselves, Whoopi. It's not a lie to tell people to work hard and believe in themselves. What's dangerous is telling people they're doomed before they even treat them. That's cruel. That last word hung in the air like a challenge. Whoopi straightened in her up by her expression, icy. Oh, please. You sit in your mansion with your millions and your personal chefs and your private jets, and you dare talk about struggle. You're a brand, Jason, not a person. And brands don't care about people. They care about profit. So spare me the humble routine. We all know what you really are. For the first time, Jason's smile completely vanished. And what exactly am I, Whoopi? He asked, his voice a low growl. Whoopi didn't hesitate. You're a fraud, a walking billboard, a man who spent so much time playing the hero that you've forgotten what it means to actually be one. There it was, the word that finally sliced through Jason's composure like a blade. Fraud. For the first time, he leaned forward slightly, his shoulders squaring off toward her. I've fought every day of my life for everything I've built, he said, each word deliberate. If you think that makes me a fraud, then maybe you should take a long, hard look at what you consider authentic. The room went completely still. The lights above seemed suddenly harsher. And yet, somehow, everyone in the studio knew they hadn't even reached the climax of this storm because there was still one line left for Whoopi to cross. The air in the studio had shifted from tense to suffocating. Every eye was fixed on Jason and Whoopi as they sat just a few feet apart, locked in a verbal duel that felt like it might boil over into something even more unpredictable. The audience was dead quiet, leaning forward in their seats, hanging on every word. Even the other hosts, Anna, Sunny, and Sarah, sat frozen, unwilling to step between the two titans, now facing off under the harsh studio lights. Jason adjusted his leather jacket over his casual t-shirt, sitting back slightly as if trying to reclaim his composure. He ran his fingers along the edge of the table, then spoke with measured calm. You know, Whoopi, it's fine to not like me. It's fine to think I'm not talented, but at least don't stand here and pretend that what you're doing is anything other than trying to tear somebody else down to make yourself feel bigger. Whoopi smirked at him, unbothered. Oh, Jason, don't flatter yourself. I'm not threatened by you. I'm just tired of people like you. People who get celebrated for showing up while the rest of us have to actually work. Her words were laced with venom now. Jason tilted his head, his voice cool. I've been working since I was 15, Whoopi. Nothing I have was handed to me and thought, I'm sorry if that doesn't fit the narrative you have built in your head. Whoopi's hands clutched her cards a little tighter, but her voice stayed sharp. Working, please. You were handed a platform because you could be in the right place at the right time and smile for the camera. That's not work. That's a circus act. A faint murmur passed through the audience at the jab. Jason's jaw clenched as he tried visibly to let the comment slide, but it was getting harder. You don't have to respect my past, he said quietly, but you don't get to erase the thousands of people who looked up to me because they finally saw someone who fought his way out of nothing and made something of himself. Whoopi waved her hand dismissively. Yeah, the poor kid made good. We've heard it before, but don't come on my show and preach like you're some kind of saint. You've made millions playing the same dumb brute over and over. Where's the art in that? This time the audience gasped audibly. Jason straightened his back, his eyes narrowing slightly as he replied. Maybe the art is in showing people that no matter where they come from, they can be something more. Maybe the art is in making people feel hope when the world gives them none. Or maybe you're just too bitter to see it anymore. That one landed. Whoopi's expression hardened, her lips thinning. She leaned forward, her voice low but cutting. You know what I think, Jason? I think you fooled everyone. I think you fooled yourself. You're not a role model. You're just another overpaid musclehead selling empty slogans to desperate people who don't know any better. Even Anna and Sarah flinched at that, but it was when she dropped the next line that everything changed. You know, she said, her voice dripping with disdain, I even wonder if you're a good father to those girls you keep posting on Instagram, because from what I can see, you're too busy playing superstar to actually be there for them. The words cut through the air like a blade. Jason froze, his smile gone completely now, replaced by a look of stunned disbelief. His fists resting on the table tightened. The muscle in his jaw twitched. The entire audience gasped. Sarah's hand flew to her mouth. Even Whoopi's fellow hosts shot her alarm glances as if realizing she had crossed a line she could never uncross. Jason's voice, when it came, was low, steady, and carried more menace than anything he'd said before. Don't you dare bring my kids into this, he said, each word deliberate, his chest rising and falling with controlled fury. Whoopi tried to wave it off, but the damage was done. Oh, please, she said flippantly, though her voice wavered slightly now. I'm just saying what everyone else is thinking. Jason stood, and when he stood, he towered over the table, his presence swallowing the entire set. The leather jacket hung perfectly over his massive shoulders as he leveled his gaze at Whoopi, who now sat stiffly in her chair, suddenly looking smaller under his shadow. You can question my talent. You can insult my work. You can take shots out of my story, but you do not question me as a father. You do not talk about my girls, ever. The words echoed in the silent studio. Even the cameras seemed to hesitate before zooming in on his face, stone unyielding and utterly done with the charade. The audience sat frozen, holding their breath, unsure of what would happen next. And without another word, Jason began unfastening his microphone. The tension was so thick even the crew had stopped moving. The only sound was the faint scrape of his chair as he stepped back from the table. Whoopi opened her mouth to speak, perhaps to walk it back, perhaps to double down, but Jason cut her off with a single sharp look. He handed his mic to the nearest producer and adjusted his jacket. Then he turned to Whoopi one last time, his voice low and steady. You've said more about yours in the last 20 minutes than you've said about me, and none of it's good. I hope someday you figure that out. And then, with the eyes of the nation on him, he began walking toward the exit, leaving the studio stunned and silent behind him. The only sound was his measured footsteps fading into the distance. The studio doors closed behind Jason Momoa with a muted click, but the weight of his presence lingered long after he was gone. The audience sat frozen, Their applause from earlier, a distant memory now replaced with hushed whispers and stolen glances at one another. Whoopi Goldberg stayed in her chair, her eyes fixed on the table, her hands still clutching her question cards. For the first time during the entire ordeal, she looked small. The self-assured smirk that usually adorned her face was gone, replaced by something harder to read, perhaps even regret. The other hosts exchanged awkward glances. Ana Navarro cleared her throat as if to speak, but stopped when she caught the expression on Whoopi's face. Sarah Haynes busied herself shuffling papers that didn't need shuffling. Her cheeks flushed pink. Even the studio crew, usually invisible professionals, stood frozen in place. Whoopi finally looked up, her eyes meeting those of the audience. There was no applause, no murmured support, only the sound of one woman in the back quietly whispering. That was too far. She leaned back in her chair, exhaling slowly. Well, she said, her voice uncharacteristically shaky, I suppose we'll take a quick break. But no one moved to cut to commercial. In the control room, the producers were frantically trying to figure out what to do next. On social media, clips of the heated exchange were already being uploaded and shared at lightning speed. Hashtags like #Jason Momoa walks out and #Whoopi crossed the line began trending before Jason even reached his car. In the hallway outside the studio, Jason stood alone for a moment, leaning against the wall. His massive frame still emanated quiet fury, but his breathing was steady now. A production assistant approached timidly with his coat and he took it with a polite nod. Thanks, he muttered, pulling it on over his leather jacket and casual t-shirt. His publicist caught up to him just as he reached the elevator. Jason, wait, maybe we can, he stopped her with a raised hand. No, he said firmly, his voice low but calm now. We're done here, there's nothing left to fix. The elevator door slid open and he stepped inside without another word. Back in the studio, Whoopi attempted to regain control of the situation. Well, she began again, forcing a laugh that rang hollow in the silence. You know, things can get a little heated around here sometimes. But the audience didn't respond. Anna finally spoke, her voice hesitant but clear. Whoopi, I think that crossed a line. Even Sarah nodded reluctantly. Whoopi's eyes darted between her colleagues, her jaw tightening as if to defend herself, but the words caught in her throat. Instead, she stared down at her notes, silently, willing the segment to end. When the show finally cut to commercial, the studio erupted into quiet chaos. Crew members scrambled to reset. The hosts whispered furiously among themselves, and the audience remained seated, unsure whether to clap or simply leave. Outside, Jason stepped into a waiting black SUV. As the door closed behind him, he pulled out his phone and opened Instagram. For a long moment, he stared at the blank screen. Then he typed a single message, posted it, and set the phone down on the seat beside him. Lesson of the day, always stand tall, even when others try to tear you down. Especially then. Within seconds, thousands of likes and comments poured in supporting him, praising him for his dignity, his composure, and for walking away before saying something he'd regret. Meanwhile, back at the studio, Whoopi sat silently in her chair as the next guest was ushered in. The energy in the room had shifted irreversibly. Even she could feel it. She straightened her stack of cards, but her hands were trembling slightly now. She glanced once more toward the doors where Jason had exited and muttered under her breath, too quiet for anyone else to hear. Maybe I went too far. The segment wrapped up without incident, but it was clear to everyone, the co-hosts, the crew, the audience, that nothing would erase what had just happened. Later that evening, headlines blazed across every major outlet. Jason Momoa walks out on The View after heated clash with Whoopi Goldberg. Don't you dare talk about my kids. The Aquaman's explosive exit from The View. Whoopi faces backlash over harsh interview with Jason Momoa. Clips of the confrontation flooded timelines and news feeds, sparking debate and igniting conversations about professionalism, respect, and boundaries. Jason never responded publicly again. He didn't need to. The world had seen enough. And as the dust settled, one thing was clear. He may have walked out of that studio, but he walked out with his head held high while Whoopi was left to pick up the pieces of a moment that she couldn't undo. If you thought the story was as intense as we did, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to our channel, Star Kind Stories, for more dramatic, unforgettable moments from behind the scenes of Hollywood. Let us know in the comments. Was Jason right to walk out, or did Whoopi just do her job? Thanks for watching, and remember, sometimes the most powerful thing you can say is nothing at all.